Hello folks, this is Roger Daniel Alcocer, producer and founder of the Magnificent World of Toys YouTube channel. As you may or may not know, I'm quite a collector myself. I collect movies, I collect comics, I collect music, I collect toys especially. In case you can't tell, I want to present to you guys the top 5 toys in my collection that bring me the most nostalgia. Now, I'm not going to be listing these like in the order of least favorite to most favorite. The way I want to list these is basically in the order of which I obtained them as a child. So bear with me because there's a lot of story that goes along with these pieces, and that's what makes them special. So without further ado, here we go. Number 5, He-Man and Battle Cat. So at a very early age, my mother and father would divorce. I must have been like 5 or 6. We went to move with my aunt, my father's sister, and my uncle and my cousins. And so I'll never forget, that first Christmas that we stayed there, it was like so cool. My aunt, she got us stockings with our names on it, and she said, well, this is where you basically fill out your letter to Santa and you put it in there, and Christmas morning, if you're good, then maybe you'll get what you want. And I just clearly remember taking my letter and writing, all I want for Christmas is He-Man. If I could get He-Man, I'd be the happiest kid on earth. Lo and behold, Christmas morning came and there was a box under the tree about this big. And sure enough, it was the He-Man and Battle Cat set. And there was no greater feeling on earth than finally having a He-Man of my own after coveting it and seeing it on TV and going to the stores and being told by my parents, no, we don't have the money for that. And that was one of the greatest days of my life. I remember I played with that He-Man and Battle Cat so much, and it was unfortunate. I didn't really have any feelings or anything, but I would spend hours just mounting He-Man on Battle Cat and posing it and just admiring it. It was just like one of the coolest feelings on earth. And eventually when I would grow up, that's one of the figures that was a top priority to reacquire, and I certainly did once I got a job and stuff. So what that means is that I would eventually lose that He-Man and that Battle Cat, and that story is yet to come a little bit later in this video. With that being said, here's number 4, and number 4 is Serpentor. So this next story, I'm not exactly proud of it. Sometimes, I feel bad for what I did. And so, as I stated, we had been staying with my aunt. My father, he'd come by like on Fridays and he'd pick us up, and for whatever reason, we'd hang out with my dad on Saturdays, and then he'd take us to hang out with my mom on Sundays. So one Friday night, he comes to pick up my younger brother, Omar, and myself. And, he took us with him, to wherever it was he was living at the time. And it was just this weird place. He had like a bunch of friends of his and day laborers, I guess that's what they were, who were living with him. There was like a dozen of these guys. And these guys, started getting drunk. They started fist fighting. And my dad basically just pulled my younger brother and me and said, you know what, we're getting out of here. And so he took us to a motel down the street. And so I remember, as we're kind of unpacking and stuff like that, my dad, he put all the clothes in the restroom and all that. And so, and then, when it was time to brush my teeth, and I go into the restroom and I notice my dad's pants are in there, and there's money kind of falling out. I figured, well, one less $20 bill, a couple less 5s and 1s isn't gonna hurt my dad. And I basically stuffed them in my pockets. And so the next day, my dad, he takes us to my mom's apartment. And so my mom at that time, we'd go to the park and stuff. She didn't have a lot of money, and that's about all she could do for us, take us to the park or to the library. And so, my mom asked us, what do you guys want to do today? Do you want to go to the library? Do you want to go to the park? And I said, no, Mom, I think we're going to go to the mall. And my mom didn't, she kind of was like, okay, I don't have money for that. And I said, well, Mom, maybe I do. And so I don't remember what I told my mom, how I accumulated that money or whatever, but my mom didn't seem to care. She said, okay, let's go to the mall. And so naturally, as any kid would do, first place we hit was the toy store. And I remember I hit KB Toys and I saw Serpentor. And so I grabbed the Serpentor and some Return of the Jedi action figures. But I just remember being more excited about the Serpentor, I guess because he was just such a cool looking character. I don't recall what happened to my Serpentor. I do remember leaving him with my mom, and I would play with him when I would go see her during the weekends. And so I'm thinking maybe it might have gotten lost or something at some point while she was moving around and stuff. But I would later acquire, when I got older, another Serpentor, and I found a nice box one. And so it was really cool to get reunited with Serpentor and just playing with him and opening him up. It took me back to that very special day I had with my mother. And it was like a really great time during like some really sad times that we were going through. Number 3, Modulok. So we were still living with my aunt for a bit, but one particular day, which was actually my birthday, I remember my dad picked me up, and I remember him taking me to Woolworths. Much to my surprise, the first thing we did was we hit the toy aisle. And my father said, "Hey, look, why don't you pick something? It's your birthday and I want to get something for you." And that was a very special moment for me because that's the first time in my life that my dad had ever done anything like that for me. And so, I mean, I was super excited. I mean, I was looking at the Transformers, but the Transformers were just like really expensive. I asked my dad, I said, "Look, can I get an Optimus Prime?" And my dad said, "Well, yeah, I did say get whatever you want, but maybe not that, maybe not this time." And so he said, "Look, aren't those He-Man toys you like?" And he was pointing towards the Masters of the Universe stuff. And I said, yeah, Dad, I love that. And, I have my He-Man and Battle Cat, but I don't have a villain. And so, my dad, it was interesting because he's kind of looking through the toys too, and I guess trying to find one that might be good for me. But my dad pulls out this yellow box, and I was like, "Well, what is that?" And it was Modulok, and I had never seen Modulok before. I don't recall ever seeing the commercials. We definitely didn't see him in the animated series. And so I was like, "Okay, Dad, yeah, I think I'll take this one." I mean, I was just really amazed that it was basically 2 figures in one, that you could do all kinds of things with him. You could like take him apart and rebuild them. And so, yeah, I remember taking him home and playing with my He-Man Battle Cat versus Modulok, and that was just super fun. I guess long story short, I would eventually lose these toys. One day we were at school, my brother and I. My father hadn't picked us up yet, and so it was kind of like weird. We were like, "Well, what's going on here?" And so we decided to basically just walk to our apartment, and we realized that my father wasn't there, door was locked, and apparently, they were evicting everybody from that complex. And so my dad, we were like some of the last people to leave, I guess. And so I remember we looked through the window and everything, all our possessions were gone with the exception of our toys. Like we looked through the window and we could see our toys in there. And so we tried to, I guess, when we kind of figured out what might have been going on, we were trying to kind of wedge open the window to get in there to get our toys, or like try to open the door, but we couldn't get in there. And so my aunt eventually showed up and she said, "Hey, we're sorry we're late. Your father moved to another place. I'm going to take you guys to him." And so our aunt took us with our father, and we told our father, we're like, "Hey, Dad, our toys are back there. Can we go back and get them?" And my dad was like, No, just don't worry about them. Those toys are trash. I'll buy you new ones." And I mean, we were upset. We cried. We wanted our toys. We kicked and screamed. And so, but yeah, we didn't get our toys back, and so that's how I lost my Modulok and my He-Man and my Battle Cat. And so, one cool thing though is that I'd say about maybe 15 years ago, my older cousin, he was asking me about my He-Man and Battle Cat and whatever happened to him, and I told him the story about Modulok, and he's like, "I didn't know you had it," and well, yeah, I did, and I remember. We were talking about it, and I told him how I lost it and stuff. And then I'd say about a month later, I got a package in the mail, and it was Modulok from my cousin. And it was like one of the coolest gifts that I've ever gotten in my life. And it was just no better way than being reunited with one of my childhood toys than than that. And so it's cool, you know, I have my box Modulok. Also, anytime I see loose Modulok parts in the wild, I try to pick them up. I have this crazy idea that one day I'm gonna build one of the biggest configurations of Modulok known to man. But I've kind of slowed down trying to look for Modulok parts for now because I've got my sights set on other stuff, but I think it's something I definitely want to do in the future. Number 2, Rambo and the Forces of Freedom. So where my dad would eventually move us to was a very awesome location. I mean, we were basically flanked by 2 arcades, a comic book shop, a movie theater, and the Pasadena Mall. And so it was pretty cool because sometimes we'd come home on random weekdays, and if my dad, you know, was feeling good or he had like loose change, he'd give us a couple of bucks and we'd either hit the arcade, the comic shop, or the movie theater. But on weekends, my dad, he would tend to give us a lot more money. What we would do is we would actually walk about 2 to 3 miles to the Pasadena Mall. You know, there was 2 toy stores. There was a KB toy store and then there was another toy store downstairs. I don't remember the name of that toy store for the life of me, but for whatever reason, that store always had the better deals. I remember always seeing the commercials of Rambo and the Forces of Freedom. The commercials were awesome. I just remember seeing these kids playing, you know, in like a backyard or whatever and building all these fortresses and blowing them up and stuff. And I was like, man, that would be such a cool way to play. And so, but you know, I obviously have to get Rambo figures first. And sure enough, that day we show up to the mall and we go into that toy store and there's an abundance of Rambo figures. But not only that, all of them are just like on clearance. Like everything was like dirt cheap. I mean, the little weapon accessories and stuff, they were like about 79 cents. The figures were like $1.50. And the first figures I bought were Rambo and Mad Dog. I mean, those figures were just awesome. Mad Dog I thought was just so cool. I loved his hairstyle. I loved his outfit. And then I also loved Rambo, how he had that cut off white hoodie and those blue jeans. For whatever reason, I preferred that one over the shirtless Rambo. I just thought the head sculpt was better. One day, you know, we go to the beach and, you know, me wanting to play with my toys in the beach like kids did in the commercials and stuff like that, decided to take my Rambo toys. And so I went to the water and, you know, to get wet. And I just remember like seeing some kids from a distance, like hanging out in our area. And I was just wondering what was going on. And I noticed they're playing with my toys. And so I come running out of the water. And I guess what they had been doing was they were popping off the heads of my action figures, my Rambo figures. And so I was able to pop Rambo's head back on, and when I wanted to put Mad Dog's head back on, I couldn't find it. And so, you know, I was asking the kids, you know, hey, where's the head? What happened to it? And neither of them could tell me. You know, those kids ran off, they were gone, and so was my Mad Dog head. And so I just remember the last couple hours that I was at that beach up until sundown, I was like digging through the sand trying to find Mad Dog's head, which I never found. And I remember crying all the way home. It was like a really heartbreaking experience for me. I just hated when my toys would break and then they would be incomplete. It would just drive me nuts. And so, you know, unfortunately, once Mad Dog was like done, I kind of lost interest in my Rambo toys. You know, I would eventually try to go find myself another Mad Dog, but I would never find him again, especially at that price. And so that really discouraged me with my Rambo toys, and I just remember putting them aside, and which was very unfortunate because I would eventually end up losing them and often think about those toys and how cool they were until, you know, obviously when I grew up, I started buying them again. Actually, I took a trip to Kelly's Toy Stop and I remember seeing a loose Mad Dog and a carded one, and I bought both of them. And one of the coolest things that I've actually recently acquired that I never had as a kid and I never thought I would, and I would rarely ever see it at the stores, and even if it was there, I don't think I'd be able to afford it, is my Savage Strike headquarters, which I bought from a good friend of mine. And so it's pretty cool to have that in the box and complete. I mean, the box is a little beat up, but the art still looks good and all that. And so this line is actually one that I would like to eventually complete. I only need a handful of vehicles and a few figures, but I mean, if I don't get all of them or whatever, if I can't collect them all, you know, I'm happy with what I have. I at least have the key players and the ones that were more important to me during my childhood. All right, number one, once again, G.I. Joe, and that is Shockwave. My father was, you know, divorced, single, and, you know, he apparently he knew another woman prior to marrying my mother, and that would later become my stepmom. She would move in with us, and you know, and that was great because that kind of brought a second form of income into our household. And so on weekends, my father, he'd go to the Santa Anita racetrack. So my dad, he had the brilliant idea of saying, well, look, how about I drop you guys off at the adjacent Santa Anita Mall. I give you guys some money and you guys hang out at the mall all day, and I'll go to the racetrack and I'll pick you up at 5 o'clock when I'm done. And the cool thing about the Santa Anita Mall, yeah, it had a lot of cool toy stores. It had a gamekeeper, which, you know, actually made me grow a love for role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons. And then it had a movie theater. We would go to the movies a lot. The thing is that, you know, we'd catch a matinee, we'd watch a movie, and then, you know, we'd go walk around the mall, and maybe towards the, you know, end of the afternoon, we'd have a slice of pizza, and that's it, until we realized maybe we could just buy a toy and have a slice of pizza. And so around that time, KB Toy Store started having a really great and remarkable clearance section. I mean, we were finding amazing things in there. And I remember the first time we watched the movie and we went to the toy store, and yeah, my brother and I, we had a couple of bucks. And so I think I must have had like maybe $3.75 left or something like that. And, you know, I saw like the G.I. Joe section. And the first G.I. Joe that caught my eye was Shockwave. And I was like, man, this figure is so cool. I went and I bought a Rampart and a Pulverizer from G.I. Joe. And so that's kind of one of my favorite vehicles too. But then also I think I had bought a bunch of like role-playing games because those things were on sale. And actually one of them, you know, I bought recently because I lost all of these, but you know, this one's the Gem and the Staff, and I just used to love the story of it and all that, and I always loved the cover. I remember buying a Casey Jones, because that's when the Ninja Turtles were out. And so, either way, I digress. The number one toy on this list is Shockwave, because that toy sort of sparked the beginning of this era in accumulating toys. And I would later go and reacquire Shockwave at Frankenson. And yeah, I remember I paid like an arm and a leg for it. I don't care, it was complete, and that's just something that I needed in my life. All right, folks, so that about does it for this video. I certainly hope that you're enjoying this top 5 series. We are hoping to do a lot more of these in the future, so be on the lookout for that. I actually have to go. I'm on my way to catch a Maniac Cop triple feature. So with that being said, may those who play never gray. See you soon here on the Magnificent World of Toys. Take it easy.